Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone. Lots of news. I'm so excited. We have news. I actually have something to talk about today. Lots of things to talk about today. So much, so much, so much. Very excited.
You take the reins because I didn't have a show yesterday due to Orioles baseball, so I shut it off. I shut it off for 24 hours.
Well, it's
So
happened in Fast and Furious this morning. Dan Quinn is speaking from the owners' meetings. Dan Quinn says Brandon Coleman to right tackle for now. So mystery one from what's going to happen with the offensive line now that Laramie Tunsil has been traded for and is obviously the left tackle. Where would Brandon Coleman go? Do you move him to guard? Do you move him to tackle? They still have Andrew Wiley under contract, but that contract makes a lot more sense now. They restructured it where they lowered the base and put in a bunch of incentives, which read to me like if you play a lot, you will reach all these, but you might not play a lot because we're either drafting a tackle or moving this guy to tackle. And this may come down to whether Sam Cosmi's ready to go or not at the beginning of the season. And if he's not, maybe you're our solution at right guard. Maybe you're not. We'll have to figure that out. And I wasn't sure what they were going to do with Coleman, but Quinn says that's where he goes for now. And he's saying his words were, that's where we're going to start him, is over there. So they still see him as a tackle. I wasn't sure. I think I landed on at the end of the year. He's a starter. He's a keeper, just like Cosmi. He's a starter. He's a keeper, but I don't know where his best position is. And they've left it kind of an open statement of he's going to go to right tackle for now, and we'll see how we feel about it as we head into the summer.
no, and this is actually the proper way to handle this. Unlike with Cosmi, where they drafted him as a tackle and then eventually put him at guard. It was never the plan. They'll tell you it was, but it really wasn't. With Coleman, I'm not surprised. I'm with you. I landed on that guy's good enough to start. I don't really care where he starts. They're better when he is out there. So not surprising that he's going to be at right tackle for now and the way that the offseason has shaken out so far.
This is the other part of this too. I think that and Adam Peters said this yesterday, and I fully agree with this. After the deals that they did for Debo and specifically Tunsil, the Tunsil deal has a trickle-down effect for everything that they've been able to do, that it put them in a position where they could draft any position now, anything but quarterback, because obviously they don't need one of those, but they could really go in any other direction. Otherwise, I think that the offensive line would be screaming at them that they have to do something at 29, take best available, maybe even think about moving up. By getting Tunsil and moving Coleman, it opens up the board for them. And he kind of openly talked about it. He's supposed to say that anyway, but I believe it. I think the board is wide open to them now because of that Tunsil trade. 1, they got an all-pro left tackle. 2, Coleman's a starter. You can put him somewhere else. 3, you're waiting out Cosby, but now you have options as you wait for him to get back on the field because you're much deeper than you were. And the offensive line's just in a better space than it was across the board. And 4, and maybe most importantly, and this is where I think Quinn saying Coleman going to tackle for now screams to me they're not taking a tackle actually early. I was still open to the idea of, well, just because they traded for Tunsil doesn't mean they wouldn't go draft, I don't know, that Oregon tackle if he was there because he could play right tackle. That puts Coleman squarely at guard. But them putting him at tackle signals to me that towards the end of the month, that's actually probably not the direction they're going. So if you're looking for tea leaves of what position are they going to draft early with their 2 early picks, it does not feel like tackle is going to be that any longer.
I always thought the kind of screaming need of another edge rusher or going elsewhere. Like, I just think their needs are a little bit more than tackle. So I never really thought they were going to go tackle unless it was just like best offensive lineman and some guy dropped, right? But to me, I'm with you. I think it signals that they're probably going to go best defensive player. And I don't think they're going to draft an offensive lineman. I think they've kind of got their set minus 1 or 2, camp bodies or guys they might sign. I think they're set at that position group right now. The need is bigger elsewhere at that end of that first round than to draft an offensive lineman, I think.
I agree. It feels like now, and it could be any one of 3 positions, 3, edge rusher, corner, safety. Any of those feel like the most likely scenario now for what their top pick would be. And I agree. Off of hearing him just say, I think we're going to start him at right tackle, I went, well, you're not picking one then early. You're not doing that early. I still think they could take a running back early. I still think that could happen with the first or second pick that they have. Or as Peters intimated yesterday, and he should say this, we have 5 picks for now. We're open to all ideas. We've been talking about this for weeks, that they gave up some draft picks. I think that I appreciated this. They said they want to build through the draft. They looked at the options in free agency, though, and went, we can't overspend for some of these guys. And if we are going to improve our roster, we have to get out of, this is what we said we're going to do. We have to do something else. We have to trade some assets away. It doesn't mean they can't get them, or at least attempt to get them back. Somebody has to want 29 for us to actually move away from it. He also did the typical throughout we could do anything, we could move up. That feels very unlikely that they would actually move up from where they are, knowing that they value the draft picks and would like to get more of them. They're not an F them picks team, but to make their team better, they had no real choice but to do what they did, which was to trade away the assets because the options in free agency weren't very good. Now there's a possibility of them recouping them. I agree with you. I think it's screaming that the top of the draft is now defense, whether it's best edge rusher, best corner, that's a possibility still now too. That safety out of South Carolina suddenly looks very intriguing, eye-popping numbers, has the size. They don't have Chin on this roster any longer, had that imposing look to him. So I don't really know if that's something that would be of interest, but I do still feel like also running back more and more and more and more is starting to make a lot of sense. There are a lot of really, really, really good ones. And if either the guy out of North Carolina or potentially Travion Henderson out of Ohio State are there at 29, that might be the value pick. But I agree, defense is the area of need now across the board for the draft.
On running back too, it's worth just looking at the contracts. There are no running backs under contract after next season. So
that's right.
That's like sometimes you just don't overthink with what you also need and who might be there as well. If you get a running back, you nailed the first round pick. All of a sudden, that's something you don't have to worry about next year going into that offseason. You can find veterans to fill out the group, right? So, yeah, there are other times here too where, yeah, I think it should be best defensive player, but I'm with you. I don't rule out running back because of the actual look ahead of what the group looks like, which is literally nothing after next season.
I thought we were going to have this discussion in a year. Like, it looked like they had to rebuild both sides of the ball, that there was a lot of holes here to fill, and that at some point they were probably going to have to make a choice. The Eagles are in a funny situation where they have like top 5 to top 2 offense and defense at the same time. They've got the best roster I've seen in a long time. That's rare. Typically, you got to make a choice here. Which one is it going to be? And because of the structure of the team, I didn't see where are we going to load up. Well, they went and got Tunsil. They went and got Debo. I still believe they could use 1 or 2 more explosive playmakers. That could happen in the draft. It can happen in free agency, but most likely happens in the draft. We are at a point now, if they go running back early, I think what they're yelling is, we know our defense, we think it can be better in year 2, and we think we have upgrades. We'll have to see if that's truly if that truly is what they have. But we're acknowledging we might not have a top 10 defense. We need to have a top 5 offense, and we're going to go over the top with it. And so I feel like that decision is happening in real time. They went and got an all-pro tackle. They brought in a Pro Bowl caliber, explosive, movable part receiver. They're one explosive playmaker at any position group away from having a dynamic offense with this quarterback now. Running back feels very right to me to go in that direction, and they're tipping their hand. Okay, we can't turn around our defense personnel-wise to be a top 5 defense overnight. We're going to build on it, but we can, if we want a challenge to win a championship, we could have an overwhelming offense if we had 1 or 2 more pieces, and we could have it right now.
I think I might have mentioned this before. It feels like the inverse of the post-2020 season. Remember, the defense was just so damn good. All we said was that offense needed to score like 1 more touchdown a game, and their record would have been flipped from 7-9 to like 10-7 or 10-6, whatever it was at that point in 2020. And remember, it was like, oh, well, they added Ryan Fitzpatrick. That should give them a few more points a game. They should be pretty good. Of course, it didn't go to plan because Ron. But in this case, this is like the opposite. They're going, you know what? We know the defense isn't going to be as good, but we know our offense is going to be great with number 5 starting. And I think they're anticipating something here too. Like, I don't think you need the perfect amount of playmakers here. because we don't know how good Jaden Daniels is going to improve from one year to the next. I have all the faith in the world. He is going to improve. I know it's hard to improve on last season, but if there's anything that we saw with that kid, it was that he basically doesn't get phased and he gets better and better with every single game. So I think maybe there's a little bit of anticipation there too of like, we think this guy's going to make a jump and he can maybe cover up some of the defense's, blemishes is what we'll call it there. The funny thing though is that defense last year on paper, it looked okay, but they were playing pretty good by the end of the season. So yes. Same thing. Like, I think if you're Adam Peters, it's almost a little like, it's almost like a little Mike Rizzo in the bullpen here. Mike Rizzo goes into every single season and the bullpen looks like a mess. And usually by the end of it, he's hodgepodge together something that is resembling a major league bullpen. I feel like that's Adam Peters this season is he's going in there going, I got some really good pieces on defense and I'll just work on the fly just like I did last year where remember they made a constant amount of moves every single week, cutting Jamin Davis and Emmanuel Forbes and making some moves throughout the year. This is one where I think the defense just becomes kind of the work in progress as the year goes on.
Yes. They acknowledged basically, you have to go in with what you have. They went in, they weren't strong enough on the edge. Their run defense suffered for it. It got bad as the season progressed. And when they played really, really good run teams, the Eagles, the Ravens, a couple of others, they got smoked by those teams on the ground. Yeah. They've made a consistent effort here to go get people like Javon Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise. They're trying to help, like they didn't value, Dante Fowler doesn't want to hear this, but they didn't value his effort on the edge. They loved what kind of pass rusher he was, but he was a situational player. He's not supposed to be out there on a single play. They were weak on the edge. They've addressed it, but I'll say this over and over. I still think they need a couple of their own explosive playmakers on that side of the ball to flip games. Luvu can be one of them. They're suggesting Kinlaw could be that. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I think their corner group is better. Maybe a healthier Marshawn Lattimore changes all of that for them. But I'm looking for their Micah Parsons, or I'm looking for their Trayvon Diggs. I am looking for their, who is the guy that flips games? And that hasn't been there yet. That said, they're stronger. They're deeper at the spots. And in general, they're not a team that gives up a ton of big plays in general anyway. Their chief complaint, and I agree with this, was they weren't turning the ball over. They preached this over and over, where ball is life. They were one of the worst teams in the NFL at turning people over. I look at the personnel and go, I'm not sure who the people are on the defense that are supposed to be doing that for you. And that's why I think they're still a player or two away, but they're stronger. And I think at this point, you just have to look at the whole thing and go, our strength is going to be our offense. I think we need to try to, if we're going to really try to win, we need to have an overwhelming offense. We have fixed or made a lot better the offensive line. Debo improves our receiving core dramatically. We're a running back away, a dangerous running back away from being a team that nobody is going to want to try to handle and game plan for. And I agree. Like, I didn't think it would happen this fast that they would make the choice, but it feels like they are making the choice. And it feels like they're making the right one, because I don't think there wasn't enough people in free agency to alter what they wanted to do on that side of the ball. You can't fix it all in the draft. That one's going to remain the work in progress. But realistically, they were a middle of the road, not bad defense. And if you looked at their roster across the board, you didn't look at that and go, oh, that's going to be a top anyway.
No, I mean, look at what happened at the end of games last year. They won 5 games in a row at the last second. And look at who the offense was. It was Jaden and Terry McLaurin and some clutch passes to Zach Ertz and Lamade Zaccheaus and sometimes Jamison Crowder. I feel like Jaden is so good that gets lost in the shuffle a little bit, especially on the national level of who he was really throwing to on those last second drives. They don't just get down there throwing to Terry every time or throwing it to Zach Ertz, who literally falls down every time he catches the ball. We know what we get with Ertz at this point, but I don't think there's even enough emphasis on what Jaden was working with last year was just, I don't want to disparage the guys there, but it was just a lot of guys essentially. And now it's not. And the way that Debo pumps the depth chart down and all of those guys now will be playing against, technically worse players at their positions. I don't think it's talked about enough, honestly, what he was working with last year. He essentially was, had a number 1 wide receiver and then a group of guys playing the number 2, as we talked about all year long.
They also look at the schedule. Look at who they're playing this year. I haven't, we don't know the order yet, but go look who they're playing this year.
Yeah.
AFC West, NFC North. Chiefs, Broncos now. Raiders will just have to see what they are. Chargers, right? Okay.
Yep.
3 very good quarterbacks. A couple of teams are going to be very high scoring teams. I'm going to assume the Chiefs are going to bounce back and they're going to score points again. NFC North, Bears, Packers, Detroit, Minnesota. They're all potentially high scoring, high level offensive teams. I don't know whether the Eagles, you have to beat the Eagles. You're going to have to score points to beat the Eagles. They're going to play Miami as one of the teams that is the extra game that they have. They're playing Atlanta, who could be a lot better on offense this year with Michael Penix. They're going, period. Like, even if their defense was much better, they're going to be in a lot of high scoring games. And I don't know whether they purposefully looked at it this way, but the schedule reads, you better have a top 5 offense if you're going to survive it, because they're going to have to win some high scoring games against teams this year, just based on what it looks like that their schedule and what these teams, how prolific a lot of these teams are going to be. They've got a rough road here. And it's not just us. The Eagles do too. They got to play the same divisions that Washington does. But that's a rough spot to hit those 2 divisions in the same year. NFC North, AFC West. NFC North might be the best division in football, top to bottom. AFC West, you have to do. We're playing in Kansas City. It's not even here. Like, it's going to be a very, very tough road. This team is going to have to score in the high 20s and be a top 5 scoring offense to have any real shot to get through this thing this year.
Not only that, like, you had trouble with the Cowboys last year, and Dak wasn't even playing, right? Like, they put up a bunch of points with Cooper Rush, both times. So, like, that's a team that I'm not underestimating either. The Giants played them tough, and the Giants got really good on defense. Like, this to me is also a counter to them of going, well, we're going to improve our offense if you're going to improve your defense like that too. Like, there's a little bit of that chess match playing here, I think. And with the Eagles, both games came down to the fourth quarter. They were leading in the third quarter of the first one. They had to come back and win the last one. And there were some injuries in that one too. Like, I look at this as pretty much, we can improve this right now. That other side of the ball, it's going to be a little bit more of a work in progress. And
it's going to take time.
And we're seeing that it basically is.
We're going to have to see, what does next year's free agent class look like? What does next year's trade market look like? And then, again, like, they'll be short on draft picks again next year because 2 of them will have gone to Houston.
Yeah.
At that point next year, including their second round pick. So they're working through this thing to try to figure this thing out. But I do feel like the road right now, the choice was made. We're going to fix the offensive line. It needed to be upgraded, especially in light of the Cosme injury. We needed more explosive players. We addressed that initially with Deebo Samuel. Now we're in a spot where it feels like they are a good, strong, scary running back away from having an explosive offense. And that's why I would advocate, considering who's coming out in the draft this year, how rich that position is, that screams the move. At least the first or second round pick, that screams the move to go do that. And I agree, the other one needs to be best defensive player available at any of the positions that you're looking at. One of the other things that obviously came up yesterday was Adam Peters talked about Terry McLaurin and made it very clear that he's not going anywhere. And he wouldn't talk about what the talks were, where they're going to go. But I am now reassured that they're going to figure this out. And I don't want to speak for McLaurin, but I know him well enough. I have covered or called the majority of his career. He is one of the best people we have had in this locker room for a very long time. And I'm pretty convinced, and I hope he doesn't care if I say this, I think he wants to spend anyway here. He just got married. He bought this house out in Virginia. He loves wearing this uniform. And he has gotten better. And now that he has, for the first time in his career, consistent, stable, extremely high level quarterbacking, you're seeing what he's capable of. And I'm done with any conversation about, well, he's not this guy or he's not that guy. No, he's our guy. And for us, he's as good as anybody. So I'm glad to hear that everybody's on the same page. And it sounds like at some point something will get done. And I was never overly concerned about it. Like, he's too good of a representative of the team. He's too good of a player. He deserves to have the opportunity to be on a team that's a consistent winner. Of all people that's been here, he deserves to be on the team to have a chance to win. And it sounds like it's heading in that direction. I don't know about how fast, but it's heading in that direction.
I don't know if there's a player since probably, I don't know, Sean Taylor, and I'm like just guessing here, that has been more beloved than him universally. Like, there is no question whether if you're a fan of this team or not, whether you like Terry or not. Like, I know this fan base likes to have arguments about players all the time. He's the only one that I think that this fan base is like, he's untouchable. He's ours. He's one of the best. If he's not one of the best wide receivers in franchise history, he is the best one in franchise history. Like, with him, he shouldn't go anywhere. I even suggested, when we were heading into the offseason, like, do something a little outlandish, like offer him extra years on that thing if that's what it takes, right? Because you don't want him going anywhere. You could always restructure it down the line. Like, I'm not saying do something stupid here, but lock him in for the years if you can, because you can pay the money up front right now. They still have some cap room to make this happen. And yeah, I'm with you. Like, he's a good representative of the franchise. You and I both know how this works too. You stick around here long enough, you're getting a job in that front office, whether you want to be a scout or a player, something with the players, or if you want to be part of the crew that's, broadcasting or doing things on the side. Like, how this works. Like, Santana Moss is still around because he's beloved and he knows what he's talking about. Terry is, to me, is the same thing. As like Joe Gibbs would say back in the day, like a true Redskin is what I would pretty much describe Terry to as a team. You and I both know how this works. He has a career here in the DMV long after he's done if he plays his cards right here.
Yeah, I'd love for him to coach the Maryland basketball team at this point because I think he would be committed to it.
He wouldn't
not go to Villanova. He wouldn't go to Villanova.
He wouldn't napalm the program on the way out.
No,
you don't think he would do that. Yeah.
I don't think he would do that. So I'm not that I'm surprised by any of this, but like it was reassuring to hear him give up at least enough information to say we're going to get something done. Basically, he's like, I don't know when to rush. We have the cap room. We don't have to do this tomorrow, but like he's going to be here. The way he put it was for a long time. And that's honestly, it's the way it should be. His name's going to go in the Ring of Honor and he keeps going the way he did a year ago. We're going to have an interesting conversation about him in 3 to 5 years to see where his stats end up, because he does have the possibility of breaking most receiver records in the organization's history. And now that he has this quarterback with him, I'll give him a realistic shot to do it, that he's not siphoning through whichever B-level quarterback is coming in here next and sold is going to be the next whatever for this team. So I'm just happy that we're there, because you just never know, like I love John too. I like John. I think we all kind of knew over the last couple of years that I think, the time had come where it was time for him to get a new opportunity, continue his career somewhere else. It was good for the team as well. An interview he did where he said, I was really happy that they did what they did, because they could have held his feet to the fire and forced a trade because he was under contract. He wasn't going to be a free agent. He was under contract, and they released him. So they don't even get the compensatory pick or anything for walking. They released him. So there's no benefit really for them. They allowed him to do this. And I saw that he appreciated that that's what they did. And, I love John too, but Terry, there's a different feeling about him. I'm hoping, and this is rare, but I'm hoping he goes start to finish in this jersey. He should. Of all people that have come through here through the course of their careers, he deserves that. And he deserves everything that comes with that. Like, he will be, if this continues to go and if they win a Super Bowl, he's going to go down as one of those beloved players that's ever put the uniform on, and he's going to have deserved it.
On top of, all of that too, we acknowledge that it's tough for defensive tackles to have like these game-breaking, game-changing plays. I get that, but Terry has had a whole bunch of them. You could almost say he's probably had as many game-changing plays as he has had quarterbacks, which is a lot. Like there's been quite a few of both of them, and he's done it. Like for you to mention that too, of like, oh, these B-rate quarterbacks or whatever they were cycling through, his numbers still would come out, in top 10, top 5 lists because of how good he was. He was quarterback proof. Like that's so rare, especially with this franchise, that it would happen like that. The fact is, like, I can still go down the list and name, I think he's caught passes from 11 different quarterbacks. It's one of my favorite bits ever of who you've got to name who he's caught passes to, and people forget who he's caught passes from because the quarterback situation has been so bad here. And now you do look at him having a real one in Jaden Daniels, and you saw what happened last year. He was like the best deep threat wide receiver in the league. Like, that's not crazy to those of us that have been watching,
He was on bad to average teams, but he was making these catches in those games anyway.
Yes.
And so every time when people would say, what do you wouldn't do, I'd be like, show me the receiver. He's the best one of the best contested catch players in the league. And you just saw it in real time on a good team last year. All right, a couple of the little quick pieces of news that came out today. There was a lot of talk about training camp being moved out of Ashburn. And I still think down the road that potentially could happen, but apparently it's not happening this summer. So they're going to be back in Ashburn. But Dan Quinn did admit he really enjoyed having the joint practices. And so I saw Mike Vrabel yesterday hint that it's possible that the Commanders could come up to Foxborough for a week, probably leading into a preseason game. So that one feels like, mark that one down, that it's probably happening. The question will be, will Quinn want to do it? He did it twice on the road last year. He did it in New York for the Jets. He did it in Miami for the Dolphins. Will he do it twice again on the road, or will he have a team come in here? Because Washington, I believe, right, will have 2 preseason home games, right? They will. So that means we'll hear that, right? They will. They must have 2. They have to have 2 preseason home games this year. They only had 1 last year. So they have to have 2 this year. So that means he's talking about someone coming in here as well. I think these are completely, utterly worth it. And the practices often mean more than the games. So I'm all for this too. And I do think that was a lot of travel last year. That was 2 weeks on the road last year in the summer. This year would be different. It sounds like they'd go to New England if that's what ends up happening. And then somebody ends up coming here for the week, or I don't know, if Baltimore's back on the schedule, maybe it's just an easy thing to do with the Ravens again.
No, I mean, and look, the proof is in the pudding. It worked last year. Like whatever they did last year, I'm trying to mimic again this year. So I'm saying whatever you need to do, Dan, whatever you think works, we'll do it again here. I'm just guessing here. I'm riffing here, but you and I were talking in the preseason last year about how close this team was already looking, by the last preseason game. I have to think that being on the road together helps that cause, because there is a little bit of a different feel of having training camp at Ashburn. Like, we've had this discussion for years and years and years before they ever switched ownership and coaches, whatever, that like having training camp in Ashburn is okay, but it's still not your feeling of a typical training camp that other NFL teams have, where they all basically go away together, are locked away for a couple of weeks, and then released back to the world. This actually gives them a little bit more of a training camp feel, I feel like. So I'm not opposed to it, is what I'm getting at here.
I feel like they are going to go away for the summer. I thought it might be as soon as this summer. It obviously is not, but I bet by next summer that you're going to hear of a situation where they're going somewhere for training camp, and we'll see if that plays out. All right, last thing, and I assume you love this because you're a Jersey person. The NFL has agreed to now allow teams to wear their quote unquote alternate jerseys up to times. Of all teams, if they had an alternate that might want to wear it 4 times next year, it might be this one. So I got no news to share. All I'm saying is I saw that change, and let's see what happens here with the alternate jerseys of teams across the league, and specifically one around here, to see if they have news to share about that down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, I've talked about this at length with you and other podcasts. We are one of the few teams in the league that only has 3 jerseys. It's the white, the burgundy, and the black. There's room for the extra. It is typically a throwback jersey, but with some of these rebranded teams, they've just added a 4th. Like the Rams were one of those teams that added a 4th. They added a jersey that's called Bone. It's like an off-white jersey that they wear sometimes. I fully anticipate this 4th jersey is coming for us at some point. Is it an alternate? Is it a throwback? I don't know. What I loved about this rule too, though, is they have now set it so, and this is just such a dumb rule in general, they've now said it that you can mix and match everything. So, like, for example, the Packers, they have the all-white uniform. So do the Vikings. They have the all-white uniform with white helmets. They can now wear the helmets with other jerseys. So you can now start mix and matching some of these things too. And now I think this does open up a little something for the Commanders, because, well, you can add an alternate helmet. You can now wear it with all of your other looks. What could that be? Is it something you throw on the new jersey, or do you have something else up your sleeve where you could wear the black helmet with that? Like, I'm just throwing it out there. The combinations are starting to be endless at this point. So that's another rule that I'm glad the NFL threw in there, because there are some of these looks I think you can change up here and get to maybe something else. And I'm not saying just the Commanders. I'm saying that for everybody across the board.
I don't know why, man. It's such a stupid can of worms for me to open, but like, I will leave it at this. I think because I know what's going to happen if we talk about this, and everyone's going to start sending me images of the old helmet and the names coming back. I will just leave it with this. They're going to be extremely thoughtful about this.
Yeah.
Okay. Understand they are going to be very thoughtful. So whatever delusions you have of what these things are going to look like or what might be included in them, just remember the word thoughtful, because they are not going to go the direction you want them to. That's all. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's it. Okay?
And to piggyback off that, this fan base had an amazing year last year, and literally the body wasn't cold yet from the season before uniform chatter went up and people were talking about it more than the actual game that happened, in the NFC Championship. They know exactly what they're doing at this point by not being outlandish with whatever they released, because they know everyone's going to blow up at it regardless. I've had faith in this group for a while, looking at all their decision making. I have faith in whatever the next thing they're going to do is. There's going to be, I'm with you, a lot of thought behind it, because, hashtag you people, nothing is ever satisfying with a lot of you guys.
Yeah.
And so I already know they're going to say, here's the jersey, and then they're going to close the door behind them and say, talk to you in training camp. Like, they're not going to acknowledge or have any discussions around it. So, yeah.
Hashtag you people. All right. Be right back. Very much the show. ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. I used to work with Len Elmore up at ESPN. Yeah, and I got to know him. I've had many love him. He was a legendary player of the Maryland program back in the 1970s. And he's been a longtime broadcaster in mainly college basketball through the years. And I was fortunate. I got to work with him a number of times, got to know him. He's a very smart man. I love him. He really cares about the Terps program. So he put out yesterday a tweet, and I want to read it to you. Not the whole thing, because it's a little bit long, but I want to read to you parts of it that I thought were extremely relevant to what he thinks Maryland ought to do. And I personally am going to read this because I am fully in line with this. To reiterate yesterday, off of Kevin Willard's dastardly moves to go to Villanova in the middle of the night when everybody knew he was doing it and was lying about everything that was going on. And he essentially, someone put it as he was an arsonist to a big time college basketball program. And I agree. He put the house on fire and then ran away and pretended he didn't put the house on fire. Because I think he's an average to above average coach who clearly didn't want to be here. So I'd rather him not be here then, but he didn't have to do what he did. He could have, I don't know, put all of his attention into trying to go as far as he could with this particular group that was in the Sweet 16 and not, I don't know, knifed the AD, called out the organization, the entire university and the athletic department as being non-complicit, non-modern, and incapable of giving him what he needs. He didn't have to do all of those terrible things, right? He could have just said, I want to be somewhere else, period. I really enjoyed my time here. Thank you. Let's shake on it. Instead of what he did, which was so selfish, so petty, so immature. And Villanova, good luck with him. Because if he doesn't win quickly and can't beat Hurley or Patino quickly, and you start looking at him cross-eyed because you gave him everything you want, and he starts blaming everything else around you, don't tell us we didn't tell you so. And don't tell us you didn't see exactly what this brought out. So because of all of those things, not everybody is him. I am with Len Elmore to reiterate my position on this. What's happened has happened. Don't do anything rash. You need to get your house in order. You're going to eat it this year because the portal's open and players are gone. You're going to have a very hard time putting together a competitive team this coming season. But this year isn't going to be about that. You need to get the structure right. You need to start by getting the AD, the GM, your processes for how are you going to raise money? What does the revenue share look like to give you a competitive advantage or at least be competitive with the big programs? You need to figure that out. And then you need to hire, and I agree with this part of it, a Maryland man. You have to bring somebody in who cares about the brand, who wants to be there, who is going to bleed it and wants to do it because the fan base and the organization and the everybody around it, the supporters, including myself, that's what we want here. We want to get Lefty Disciple to be there. And I think that they need to take their time. So don't rush into going to find the next mercenary coach who's going to come in here and use this as it's a high-paying job in the Big Ten, and if I win, great, but I'll always be looking to go somewhere else anyway the second I get the opportunity. And here's what Len Elmore wrote in a long piece that he posted up on Twitter. The quest by fans, media types, and donor influencers to merely win the press conference by taking a big swing and hiring an outsider who leaves one program to coach the Terps only to leave after a few years is maddening. When these hires leave their former program for us, they're telling us who they are, and we need to believe them. Since our full-blooded Terp and coach, Gary Williams, retired, it's been inconsistency after inconsistency after inconsistency. The common thread, outsiders. Programs like Duke and North Carolina, to name a few, hire their own, promote their own, and are models of consistency. Their athletic department leaders are from within the family, if not outright alumni. The administration, the athletic department, the University of Maryland College Park, along with their boosters, influencers, must ignore the media recommended quick fixes and seek program consistency by hiring from within the Terp family, understanding that resulting loyalty and commitment will yield winning and respect, even in today's unprecedented program building through the current distasteful reality of pay-for-play environment. I am not a casual observer. And then he goes on and on and on. He said, basically, we need to go back to the fundamentals. We need to find somebody who cares about all of this. We need to install them. I would say you're still a step away from that. I think you need to find the right AD, the modern GM. I would look in unusual spaces like St. Bonaventure hired Woj. Like might want to talk to some big time agencies about who is your guy that can help us structure us in a modern way where we can get the money in the right place, be a place where players want to come that's not just the money, but we can grow them so that they can have long careers beyond this, maximize the college. I think we need to get that structure in place before we get around to the coach. But I agree with Len wholeheartedly. Do not do anything rash. Don't just hire a mercenary who's got a big name to see, we're still a big deal. You need to get the whole house in order. And in the end, I agree. The person who should be the face of it should be a Maryland man. I agree with that.
No, I mean, like, I agree. But what is that person? Who is that person right now? Like, that's my follow-up question. Like, that's a big question. There's a little bit of Commanders here where you and I have joked about it. How, like, okay, who are the alumni that you call on over the last 10 to 15 years? Because they were so bad, those great players don't really exist. You can count them on one hand. I'd say Maryland's in a little bit of the same boat. It's been a while since you've had anyone you can call a Maryland man that could step up and be a part of the program. Now, unless we're talking about a short-term fix here, like, somebody that's been within the program that stays in here for a year, like you're kind of suggesting, and just rights the ship for a year, and then they find their guy. Now, maybe you do that. I'm just spitballing here. But at the same time, that's all well and good that he's saying that, but I don't know if that person exists at the moment. That's what I'm getting at.
So I gotta hate doing this, but because I love my alma mater, but I can't not bring up his name.
Sure.
Dwayne Simpkins signed a long-term deal with American University yesterday for good reason, because he did play at Maryland.
Yep.
He was part of the success there. And I hope he stays there. I win either way in this situation. I think he's the best coach that they've had there in a long time. It showed in what he did just a year ago. Like, as much as I complain about the coaching that Kevin Willard did, I do not have that complaint about Dwayne Simpkins. Watch them play. Nobody does, because it's a small tier program, but I watch a lot of their games because I'm a proud alum. Standing coach. They're well organized. They're coached extremely well. What does he do with a bigger program? I don't know. Is he a big enough name to draw people in? I don't know. This is where the structure matters. We're having the quote unquote GM or AD that helps find, procure, get the deals done, recruiting the players to bring them in. I think that's where that part really matters. And I don't know that Dwayne's got a big enough name in the marketplace, but if you're looking for someone that's a quote unquote Maryland man, there he is through and through, from the area, played for Gary Williams, has worked his way into a position, has shown he's got the acumen to do it. And God, is he the perfect person to be we're not going to be very good next year, but you're going to be the coach. You're going to lay the groundwork. And then we're going to talk about what the other side is, whether it's you as the lead or you as the lead assistant or whatever it's going to be. That said, I don't want him going. I love him at AU. But when you say, who is this person? I got to tell you, like, it's hard not to look at him and go, he might be long term. And I think if he had been at AU for 4, 5, 6 years, and he was doing this regularly, what he did with them last year, regularly with them, it almost would be hard to ignore what was going on with him.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if this was a couple years down the line and he was still doing this, I think it would be like a foregone conclusion. That would be the jump. But because it's only been a couple of years, and you know how this works too, though, like Maryland people are hoops people. So they're paying attention to all the programs around here, as you should in the DMV. There's too many, to not be paying attention to a lot of them. He would be one of them that I think would be on their radar a little bit more if you had a couple more years down the line, because they're also looking at what happened.
Same with Tony Skinn at George Mason. At George Mason. He had a fantastic run there. They just re-signed him, worried that he was going to get poached by somebody else.
100%. And so, like, maybe that's your answer of being a quote unquote Maryland man, is maybe it's someone in the DMV period that knows the area, that recruits the area, that maybe doesn't have the same financials behind them that Maryland is about to have. So maybe that answers our question there. Maybe it could be someone local, and that's why you get a couple extensions like this happening at this time of the year.
The other thing too, and I'll just mention this because I want to move on to other things, but like I believe Len's right. But listen, Patrick Ewing came here, one of the most famous Hoyas of all time, and it did not work. Chris Mullin coached St. John. It did not work.
Yeah.
Like, there are plenty of examples of great alums who are, quote, in the family and are those, and it did not work. So I'm not saying it's the done for sure answer, but I agree where he's coming from, that you got to get somebody who bleeds it, because what Willard did exposed something that shouldn't be happening here. This is a destination, not a stepping stone. And I think that's the most important thing to get across. Not a stepping stone. It's a destination. And for people who have, bled it in the past, Ralph Friedgen, Gary Williams, those type of people, they will always see it that way. And that's why I think it's easy to point to them and say, don't you want to come home?
I mean, and at the same time, too, to your point of like Patrick Ewing, like Ewing not only didn't work out, it was a disaster.
It was bad.
And what you run into when you have these legends of the program come in, you have to let it play out even longer because you don't want to disparage the guy on the way out. So Ewing was probably here 2 years longer than he probably should have been, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it was bad between losing players and things going on off the court, and then them just not looking, not just good on the court, but terrible on the court. You run into that problem too, where ripping that Band-Aid off is really, really hard as well. We've seen it happen in other sports where that happens too. So I'm just counterpointing that's what also you run into if you want to hire somebody that used to go here or was a part of the program and then wants to come back. It doesn't always work out, and you have to sometimes let it play out a little bit longer.
Yep. All right, let me take a quick break. Bray Buster Show, ESPN 630, Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. All right, a couple quick thoughts. One, tank that, Wizards. The Jazz are 1-16 in their last 17 games. They've got the same amount of wins, and they got one more loss, and there's only 6 or 7 games left in the regular season. The race is on to see who can lose more. And from what I've seen from Utah, good luck to the Wizards topping what they're doing right now.
Well, who's the one win, Bram? Who's the one win? Yeah. It's the Wizards.
That's right.
They beat the Wizards. So I don't know.
They're not going to win again the rest of the year. So
yeah,
let's see what happens.
I mean, look, the Wizards have perfected the tank. We're not going to scratch guys. We're going to let them play 10 minutes and then pull them. This is just, it's a tank off. And don't you only have to be a part of the top 4 anyways to get the same amount? Like, I feel like the percentages are the same.
It's like the same amount for the top 3. So I guess it does. And the Wizards and the Jazz will both be in that, because everyone else is at least a few games above them. So
yeah. So like, I don't know, give me the same percentage at the number 1 overall pick and I'm fine here. Like, so they've done their work. They've done the majority of their work.
Let's not bury the lead. I know there's a lot going on with the Commanders today, but Ryan Leonard is officially a Washington Capital. He signed a deal. Thought it's very timely that they're playing Boston tonight. Yeah. Is he playing tonight?
Yeah, he's going to play.
Playing?
Yeah. I mean, you have to.
He practiced with them, once or at all?
He's practiced with them as we're recording this, is his first practice. So I don't know what the line.
Play him.
Yeah. I mean, you have to. You have to give him some time to play with the team. Like, he's that good. Like, he should play is what I'm telling you here. So I don't know what the lines look like at practice. We're recording right now as they are practicing. But yes, not only that, How could you not play him in Boston? He played in college there for the last couple of years at Boston College. Like, this is a perfect debut for him to debut as a Capital.
He'll be the first Cap to get a standing ovation in that place.
I mean, maybe at that point. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. It took him literally until the morning after that Boston College gets bounced from, the NCAA tournament, and he's a Capital. I'm not surprised here. I've been telling you about him for a couple years. Told you going into this year that expect him to be a Cap by the end of the season. Here we are at this point. So
it's wild.
Yeah, I mean, I expect him to slot right into the lineup. Whose spot he's taking, as I said, we're recording, I'm not sure yet. I've got a couple guesses here. Could slot in for Lars Eller, who's been really cold as of late. Andrew Mangiapane, maybe. I think he's going to be good down the stretch though, so maybe not him. Brandon Duhaime. There's a couple names here where I think he could slot in. Let's see where he does. If they do the same thing they did with Anthony Beauvillier, they'll slot him in on the fourth line, then move him up very, very fast. So I anticipate kind of the same thing with easing him into that way.
I can't wait. I'm gonna watch this tonight, see what we get out of him. I've never heard of anything like this where he goes straight from college to the pros, doesn't even practice with the team, gets slotted in. Like, that's gonna be wild in the middle on a team that's the 1 seed. It'd be one thing if they were like, here's take a look at the future. We're not gonna be a playoff team this year, but he's our star next. No, on a 1 seed that's probably gonna be a 1 seed. It's wild.
The biggest player I can remember this happening, jump to a really good team, was Chris Kreider. Chris Kreider, I think, played at Boston College or Boston, and he made the jump to the Rangers. And when he jumped into the Rangers went on their Stanley Cup run. I think this was I don't know, maybe 2012-ish, something like that. And Kreider, still in the league, a very good player. That's probably the biggest jump I remember making an impact. But here's Leonard going, hey, did you have fun in that tournament? Now let's go play for the number 1 team in the Eastern Conference with the guy who's about to break Wayne Gretzky's goal record. That's about as insane as it gets at this point. So I expect him to slot in. I don't have big expectations for game 1. I mean, what are we going to say for game 1? But I'm excited he's a part of the team. He's going to be an impact player. I've been saying it for years. Once he gets up to the league, he'll be fitting right in, essentially.
And then off the dud the other day, I expect a win tonight. So they got all this juice, so I expect a win tonight. All right, everybody. Talk to you tomorrow. Brad Boss Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.